Have you ever felt that sudden shift inside when something stops you in your tracks? A moment so unexpected, so vast, or so unfamiliar that your mind widens before you can explain why. This cluster explores those moments when life stretches beyond what we understand, when the world feels bigger than our assumptions, and when our inner world opens in response. These are the emotions that surface when it's beyond us. The expansion, the spark, the bewilderment, the instinct to lean in, pause, or marvel. Welcome to the Heart's Compass, a journey through the landscapes of human emotion. When we encounter what is beyond us, our emotions awaken, shaped by our sense of meaning, our desire to understand, and the deep human need to make sense of the world. This cluster explores the feelings that rise when we meet the unfamiliar or extraordinary, the vastness of awe, the openness of wonder, the disorientation of confusion, the pull of curiosity, the engagement of interest, the jolt of surprise, and the lightness of amusement. Awe, the expansive feeling that arises in the presence of something vast, beautiful, or beyond our understanding. Wonder, the open, spacious curiosity that invites us to explore without needing immediate answers. Confusion, the mental disorientation that signals our current understanding is too small for what we're encountering. Curiosity, the inner pull that draws us toward the unknown, seeking clarity, insight, or discovery. Interest, the steady engagement that holds our attention and invites deeper exploration. Surprise, the sudden shift that disrupts our expectations, awakening us to something new. Amusement, the light, playful reaction that softens tension and brings a sense of delight or levity. Here, emotion is not just reaction, it's expansion. These experiences reveal how we learn, how we adapt, and how we navigate the space between what we know and what we have yet to discover. Awe. Awe arrives as an expansion, a widening in the chest, a stilling of the breath, a sudden awareness that you are standing in the presence of something larger than your own understanding. It's the moment when beauty, scale, mystery, or truth overwhelms your usual frame of reference and leaves you quiet, humbled, or breathless. It doesn't soothe like self-compassion or constrict like perfectionism. It elevates. It creates a sense of reverence that whispers, "There is more here than I can comprehend." Awe is the feeling that says, "I am witnessing something greater than myself." Awe is the emotional response to encountering vastness, something so powerful, beautiful, or mysterious that it stretches your sense of scale and shifts your perspective. It emerges when you face the extraordinary, nature, art, human resilience, profound insight, or moments that reveal the depth of existence. Awe simplifies the moment by quieting the ego and expanding awareness, inviting you to see beyond your usual boundaries. At its core, awe is the emotion that says, "I am part of something immense." Awe is the quiet thunder that moves through you when you stand before a night sky full of stars, when music lifts you beyond words, when a moment of truth lands so deeply it changes the way you see the world. It is the emotional widening that happens when you encounter beauty that feels infinite, wisdom that feels ancient, or courage that feels transcendent. Where curiosity leans in and confusion questions, awe opens, dissolving the edges of your perspective and inviting you into something vast. It is the moment when time feels suspended, when your breath catches, when your mind falls silent, because the experience is too large for language. Awe can shift your sense of self, making your worries feel smaller, your perspective broader, your heart more attuned to the interconnectedness of everything. It can make you feel humbled, inspired, or deeply moved, not because you are insignificant, but because you are part of something expansive and meaningful. And yet, beneath this vastness lies a deeper truth. Awe often emerges where you least expect it, in quiet moments, in acts of kindness, in glimpses of resilience, in the simple miracle of being alive. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity for wonder, reverence, and connection to the larger story of existence. Awe becomes insight when we allow it to shift our perspective. It becomes grounding when we recognize that vastness doesn't diminish us, it situates us. And it becomes inspiration when we let it open our hearts to possibility, meaning, and connection. May we learn to meet awe with openness, not as something rare, but as something available in the extraordinary and the everyday. For beneath every moment of awe lies a longing to feel connected to something larger, deeper, and more mysterious. A longing that becomes more powerful when paired with presence, curiosity, and wonder. Wonder. Wonder arrives as a spark, a widening of the eyes, a lift in the breath, a sudden sense that the world is more interesting, intricate, or magical than you realized. It's the moment when something captures your attention in a way that feels fresh, surprising, or delightfully unfamiliar. It doesn't humble like awe or confuse like uncertainty. It awakens. It creates a bright curiosity that whispers, "There's something here worth exploring." Wonder is the feeling that says, "I want to understand this, and I'm excited to learn." Wonder is the emotional response to encountering something intriguing, unexpected, or beautifully unfamiliar. It emerges when your mind opens to possibility, when your imagination is stirred, or when something invites you to look closer. Wonder simplifies the moment by shifting your focus from routine to discovery, from assumption to curiosity. At its core, wonder is the emotion that says, "The world is full of things I haven't yet understood." Wonder is the gentle electricity that moves through you when you notice something small and extraordinary, the pattern on a leaf, the movement of light, the complexity of a simple moment. It is the emotional spark that forms when you encounter something that feels both new and meaningful, something that invites you to pause and pay attention. Where awe expands and confusion destabilizes, wonder invites, drawing you closer with a sense of possibility and play. It is the moment when you tilt your head, lean in, or ask a question simply because something inside you feels alive with curiosity. Wonder can shift your perspective, making the ordinary feel enchanted, the familiar feel fresh, the world feel more layered and alive. It can make you more open, more observant, more imaginative, not because you're searching for answers, but because you're captivated by the mystery. And yet, beneath this spark lies a deeper truth. Wonder often emerges in the quiet moments we overlook, in the details, the patterns, the small miracles that surround us every day. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity for curiosity, presence, and delight in the unknown. Wonder becomes insight when we allow it to guide our attention. It becomes creativity when we follow its questions instead of rushing to conclusions. And it becomes connection when we let it remind us that the world is richer, deeper, and more surprising than we often realize. May we learn to meet wonder with openness, not as childish, but as essential to staying awake to life. For beneath every moment of wonder lies a longing to explore, to understand, and to be moved. A longing that becomes more powerful when paired with curiosity, presence, and awe. Confusion. Confusion arrives as a fog, a blurring of clarity, a pause in understanding, a moment when the pieces don't fit the way they usually do. It's the moment when your mind reaches for meaning and comes up empty, when the familiar feels unfamiliar, when the path forward becomes unclear. It doesn't expand like awe or delight like wonder, it unsettles. It creates a mental disorientation that whispers, "Something here doesn't make sense." Confusion is the feeling that says, "I don't understand, and I'm not sure what to do next." Confusion is the emotional response to uncertainty, contradiction, or incomplete information. It emerges when your expectations don't match reality, when the situation is unclear, or when your mind can't yet organize what you're experiencing. Confusion simplifies the moment by slowing your ability to decide, pushing you to pause, gather information, or reassess. At its core, confusion is the emotion that says, "I need more clarity before I can move forward." Confusion is the mental haze that forms when your thoughts scatter, when your assumptions break, or when the world presents you with something that doesn't fit your current understanding. It is the emotional pause that happens when your mind tries to make sense of something new, unexpected, or contradictory. Where curiosity leans in and awe opens, confusion stalls, holding you in the space between what you knew and what you don't yet grasp. It is the moment when you reread the same sentence 3 times, when you replay a conversation trying to understand what was meant, when you stand still because you're unsure which direction is right. Confusion can distort your sense of certainty, making you question your memory, your interpretation, or your assumptions. It can make you hesitate, overthink, or freeze, not because you're incapable, but because your mind is signaling that it needs more time or information. And yet, beneath this fog lies a deeper truth. Confusion often emerges at the threshold of learning, growth, or change, the moment before understanding clicks into place. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity to adapt, to question, to expand beyond what you previously knew. Confusion becomes insight when we recognize it as a sign that our understanding is evolving. It becomes clarity when we allow ourselves to pause, gather information, and let meaning emerge in its own time. And it becomes growth when we stop treating confusion as failure and start seeing it as the doorway to deeper understanding. May we learn to meet confusion with patience, not as a threat, but as a signal that something new is forming. For beneath every moment of confusion lies a longing for clarity, coherence, and truth, a longing that becomes more powerful when paired with curiosity, openness, and care. Curiosity. Curiosity arrives as a pull, a gentle leaning forward, a mental reach toward something you don't yet understand but want to. It's the moment when a question forms, when something catches your attention, when the unknown feels less like a threat and more like an invitation. It doesn't unsettle like confusion or overwhelm like awe. It engages. It creates a focused interest that whispers, "There's something here worth discovering." Curiosity is the feeling that says, "I want to know more." Curiosity is the emotional drive to explore, learn, or understand something new. It emerges when your mind encounters a gap in knowledge, a spark of interest, or a possibility that feels worth pursuing. Curiosity simplifies the moment by directing your attention toward discovery rather than certainty. At its core, curiosity is the emotion that says, "The unknown is a place I'm willing to go." Curiosity is the quiet momentum that builds when a question takes root, when you feel drawn toward an idea, a person, a pattern, or a mystery. It is the emotional energy that nudges you to look closer, ask deeper, or explore further. Where wonder delights and confusion pauses, curiosity investigates, turning attention into movement, interest into inquiry. It is the moment when you open a book because a topic intrigues you, when you ask a thoughtful question, when you follow a thread simply to see where it leads. Curiosity can shift your perspective, making the world feel more layered, more dynamic, more full of possibility. It can make you more open-minded, more flexible, more engaged, not because you're searching for the right answer, but because the process of discovery feels alive. And yet, beneath this pull lies a deeper truth. Curiosity often emerges where you feel safe enough to explore, where your mind is open, where your heart is willing to be surprised. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity for learning, growth, and connection to the unknown. Curiosity becomes insight when we follow the questions that matter. It becomes creativity when we allow exploration to lead us somewhere unexpected. And it becomes wisdom when we stay open to learning rather than clinging to certainty. May we learn to meet curiosity with encouragement, not as distraction, but as a pathway to deeper understanding. For beneath every moment of curiosity lies a longing to explore, to expand, and to engage with the world, a longing that becomes more powerful when paired with wonder, openness, and awe. Interest. Interest arrives as a steady draw, a quiet but persistent pull toward something that captures your attention and holds it. It's the moment when your mind settles into focus, when something feels worth returning to, when engagement feels natural rather than forced. It doesn't spark like wonder or question like curiosity. It sustains. It creates a gentle momentum that whispers, "Stay with this. There's something here for you." Interest is the feeling that says, "This matters enough to keep exploring." Interest is the emotional state of being mentally engaged, focused, or invested in something you find meaningful or stimulating. It emerges when something aligns with your values, your goals, your curiosity, or your sense of possibility. Interest simplifies the moment by directing your attention, making it easier to learn, absorb, or stay present. At its core, interest is the emotion that says, "I want to keep going." Interest is the quiet thread that keeps you connected to a topic, a task, a person, or an idea, the steady hum of engagement that makes time feel fuller and more purposeful. It is the emotional anchor that forms when something resonates with you, when it feels relevant, when it sparks a sense of meaning or potential. Where curiosity initiates and confusion pauses, interest continues, turning attention into commitment, exploration into depth. It is the moment when you lose track of time because you're absorbed, when you return to something again and again because it feels rewarding, when your mind naturally leans toward what feels meaningful. Interest can shift your sense of energy, making effort feel lighter, learning feel easier, and persistence feel natural. It can make you more focused, more patient, more invested, not because you're forcing yourself, but because something inside you feels aligned with the experience. And yet, beneath this steady engagement lies a deeper truth. Interest often emerges where your inner world meets the outer world in a way that feels resonant, where your curiosity, values, and attention converge. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity for sustained exploration, growth, and connection to what feels meaningful. Interest becomes insight when we follow what consistently draws our attention. It becomes purpose when we allow it to guide our learning, our choices, and our development. And it becomes fulfillment when we recognize that what engages us often points toward what matters most. May we learn to meet interest with trust, not as distraction, but as direction. For beneath every moment of interest lies a longing for meaning, engagement, and depth. A longing that becomes more powerful when paired with curiosity, wonder, and awe. Surprise. Surprise arrives as a jolt, a quick intake of breath, a widening of the eyes, a sudden shift in awareness as something unexpected breaks through your expectations. It's the moment when reality changes faster than your mind can prepare for, when something new appears without warning. It doesn't expand like awe or sustain like interest. It interrupts. It creates an immediate alertness that whispers, "Something just changed." Surprise is the feeling that says, "I didn't see that coming." Surprise is the emotional response to encountering something sudden, unexpected, or out of pattern. It emerges when your predictions fail, when something arrives earlier or later than expected, or when the world presents you with a moment you weren't anticipating. Surprise simplifies the moment by sharpening your focus and redirecting your attention to whatever just happened, At its core, surprise is the emotion that says, "Pay attention, this matters." Surprise is the emotional spark that flashes when the world shifts without warning, a sudden break in the rhythm of your expectations. It is the moment when your mind pauses, recalibrates, and tries to make sense of the new information that just appeared. Where confusion fogs and curiosity pulls, surprise snaps, creating a brief, bright disruption in your awareness. It is the moment when you jump at an unexpected sound, when someone says your name from behind, when good news or bad news arrives out of nowhere. Surprise can heighten your senses, making you more alert, more focused, more present, not because you chose to be, but because your system reacted before you had time to think. It can make you laugh, freeze, gasp, or blink, not because the moment is inherently positive or negative, but because it broke the pattern you were expecting. And yet, beneath this jolt lies a deeper truth. Surprise often emerges in the spaces where life refuses to be predictable, where possibility, uncertainty, and change intersect. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity to adapt quickly, to shift perspective, to respond to the unexpected. Surprise becomes insight when we recognize what it reveals about our expectations. It becomes flexibility when we allow ourselves to adjust rather than resist. And it becomes openness when we accept that not everything can be anticipated or controlled. May we learn to meet surprise with presence, not as disruption, but as a reminder that life is dynamic, unpredictable, and alive. For beneath every moment of surprise lies a longing to understand what just changed, a longing that becomes more powerful when paired with curiosity, awareness, and wonder. Amusement. Amusement arrives as a lift, a quick smile, a soft laugh, a moment when something unexpected strikes you as lighthearted or funny. It's the moment when tension loosens, when seriousness breaks, when the world surprises you in a way that feels playful rather than overwhelming. It doesn't expand like awe or focus like curiosity, it brightens. It creates a gentle delight that whispers, "That was unexpected, and it made me smile." Amusement is the feeling that says, "This moment is lighter than I thought." Amusement is the emotional response to something humorous, playful, or pleasantly surprising. It emerges when your mind recognizes an incongruity, a twist, or a harmless absurdity that shifts your perspective just enough to spark a smile. Amusement simplifies the moment by easing tension and inviting levity. At its core, amusement is the emotion that says, "It's okay to enjoy this." Amusement is the soft laughter that rises when life catches you off guard in a harmless, delightful way. A clever comment, a playful moment, a small absurdity that breaks through the seriousness of the day. It is the emotional lightness that forms when something unexpected feels funny rather than threatening, when your mind relaxes enough to enjoy the moment. Where surprise jolts and wonder awakens, amusement warms, offering a brief, bright reprieve from heaviness or routine. It is the moment when you chuckle at a silly mistake, when a friend's expression makes you laugh, when something ordinary becomes unexpectedly delightful. Amusement can shift your mood, making the world feel softer, more human, more approachable. It can make you more open, more relaxed, more connected, not because the moment is profound, but because it's refreshingly simple. And yet, beneath this lightness lies a deeper truth. Amusement often emerges where you feel safe enough to let your guard down, where your heart has room for play, where your mind is open to joy. It is the emotion that reveals your capacity for levity, connection, and delight in the small moments. Amusement becomes insight when we recognize how easily joy can slip into our day. It becomes relief when we allow ourselves to laugh, even briefly, in the midst of stress or uncertainty. And it becomes connection when shared. A smile, a laugh, a moment of lightness that brings people closer. May we learn to meet amusement with openness, not as trivial, but as a reminder that joy doesn't always need to be profound to be meaningful. For beneath every moment of amusement lies a longing for ease, play, and connection, a longing that becomes more powerful when paired with curiosity, wonder, and awe. When we encounter what is beyond us, our emotions become invitations to expand. Awe shows us the vastness of the world. Wonder opens us to possibility. Confusion reveals where our understanding is ready to grow. Curiosity pulls us forward. Interest sustains our attention. Surprise awakens us. And amusement reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously. Together, these emotions show that the unknown is not something to fear. It is something to explore. They remind us that growth happens at the edges of our understanding, that discovery begins with openness, and that life becomes richer when we allow ourselves to be moved by what we cannot fully explain. As this cluster closes, may we carry forward the courage to meet the unfamiliar with curiosity, the humility to let mystery shape us, and the joy of being surprised by the world. For it is in the moments when life is beyond us that we rediscover our capacity for wonder, the quiet magic of being fully alive.